in an elementary discussion of the role of comparator systems in the brain, which we'll talk about in more detail, the general notion is that the violation of an expectation produces anxiety. And that's a pretty good model, and it's got some support from the psychophysiological, pharmacological literature, because if you give animals anti-anxiety agents like benzodiazepines or alcohol or barbiturates, they do respond less to the violation of, quote, expectancy. It does dampen the response. But it's an oversimplified model, and to get understanding of human behavior correct, you have to expand it a bit. It isn't precisely that unpredicted outcome is a threat and it produces anxiety. It's that unpredicted outcome makes the irrelevant relevant, and it produces an undifferentiated emotional and motivational state. It's a better way of thinking about it, because it isn't just that you don't just get anxious, for example. If something goes wrong, you get anxious, you get angry, you get curious, you get frustrated, you get depressed. Like, it's a whole bursting forward of emotions and motivational states. And that's because when something doesn't work the way it's supposed to, even when you just encounter an obstacle, it means that the way that you're construing the landscape is wrong in some manner. And you don't exactly know what you're going to have to do in order to fix that, unless it's a very trivial violation. And you know, it's one that you know immediately how to redress. Like if I'm, again, so I come around the corner and I look at that chair and I'm annoyed because it's in the way. You might think, well, how annoyed should I get? And the answer should be something like, your annoyance should be in proportion to the amount of time and energy it will take to move that chair. Right? Because that's kind of like a proper perception. So it's like, I should be that annoyed. I should be annoyed enough so that I've indexed doing that. Because that does actually take some time and energy, and that actually has a cost, and the fact that I have to pay that cost should be signified by something, because otherwise I wouldn't be sensitive to costs. And so the annoyance, if it's in proportion to the effort, is exactly indexed properly. Now, often, unfortunately, you don't know how to index. So you have an old car, you're driving to work, someone bumps you from behind, and then your car doesn't work. It's like, well, how annoyed should you get? You don't know. That's a problem. And so then all of a sudden a bunch of things that were irrelevant, which is the whole damn car, poof, become relevant. Plus you have to deal with this person that just ran into you, and what are they like? Well, they're stupid enough to run into you, so you don't know what else might be wrong with them, and maybe they're going to be a bunch of trouble, and you have to get their insurance information, and now you're on the side of the road and you don't know if you're going to go to work. And so that's when your emotions can unravel, because they're trying to compute the effort and time you're going to have to take in order to rectify this, and the span, what you would call it, the domain that is opening up as a consequence of the problem isn't easy to map. And so you get stressed, and you go home and you say, I had a stressful day, and the person says, what happened? Well, someone hit me on the highway. And they go, oh, that's terrible. They figure that out. It's like, well, I was in this little map, it was only this long, I was just going from here to here, and all of a sudden, poof, I didn't know where I was or how many places I was going to have to wander around in before I could get that map working again. But the car is an invisible predicate of multiple potential future maps as well, right? It's an axiom. You make the map presuming that you have the car, and the car isn't a metal thing with wheels. The car is a conveyance for moving you from point A to point B. And the fact that you have all these maps of moving from point A to B that are predicated on that conveyance means that when it turns into a car instead of a conveyance, poof, all those maps become extremely complicated as well. And so your body goes, well, my landscape is way more complex than I thought. Up goes the heart rate, up goes the cortisol, all of that, right? And you're more paralyzed, and you can, like if you're a neurotic person, let's say, something like that can just paralyze you. You're done. You have to phone someone for emergency help, which means you're in a map that you cannot put your map back together. You have to call on outside help in order to do it. So, and you might not even know how to do that. Okay, so that's another way. Now, here's another way of thinking about it. You want to stay inside this little map because it's working. You want to get from point A to point B, and this is good. This indicates that you are moving forward. That's the first thing it indicates. And the second thing it indicates, which is even more important, and you'll never hear this from behavioral psychologists, is that your map is correct. So every time you move a little bit forward and something that you want happens, it says, oh, the game I'm playing is the right game. And so not only does the reward indicate progress, it indicates that the frame within which progress is being calculated is the right frame. And that's good because it's the frame that makes things irrelevant. And you want them to stay irrelevant. So if you don't move forward and you start to question the frame, that's way worse than merely not moving forward. You get a bad exam grade. What do you think? What the hell am I doing in university anyways? It's like, probably that's not the first place you should go with that piece of information. And you think, well, why? Why is that worse? Well, as far as I can tell, your map of you as a university student is a comprehensive representation. It tells you what you should do every day. It kind of tells you where you're going in the future. And if something emerges as an anomaly, you get worse grade than you expected, and you blow that whole map, it's like, okay, what have you been doing for the last 4 years? What kind of high school student were you? How clueless are you about how you're arranging your future? What's your identity going to be if you're not going to be a student? Where are you going to end up in 5 years? It's like, so it's like that little grade, that bad grade is like a portal through which snakes can crawl. And that's exactly how you respond to it, especially if you open the door too much. Well, maybe this means that I shouldn't be in university. Well, one of the rules is you want to constrain the anomalous event to the minimal necessary domain. It's really, really important. You want to do that when you're arguing with your partner, which you'll do all the time. We have an argument. Well, I should never have married you. It's like, no, that's not the first response. That's a bad response. Or here's a really good one. You've always done that sort of thing, and you always will. It's like, oh good, great. It's like the only answer to that is to hit someone. Because like you're done, right? You're like that, you've always been like that. There isn't a chance that you can be repaired and none of it is acceptable. It's like the person's going to fight with you right away because what else are they going to do? So what you want to do is you want to minimize, it isn't rationalization. You want to say, okay, this person did something that disrupted our joint map. Okay. What's the smallest possible thing they could do to put it back together? And you have to know. Well, we need to make a plan so you don't do it again. Or we need to have a discussion so that you know that it wasn't a good thing to do. But I'm not going to go after your whole character. I'm going to say, when I come home and you're watching TV, just come to the door and say hello. Not, don't you love me, or something like that. It's like, no, you just have to walk to the door and like give me a hug or something, and then that's good enough. And so then the other person might be able to tolerate that much corrective information, maybe, if you're kind of nice about it, and you also understand that they're probably going to have something equally horrible to say about you in the next 15 minutes, because you're going to do something stupid. So you don't want to open the door so that every possible snake comes crawling through. Because that's a pathway to depression. And you actually see that happening in depressed people, is that every small event produces a cascade through their entire value system, and they end up saying, well, that's just another reason that I should jump off a bridge. And they really see it that way. It's really awful, because they've got no defenses. It's like, well, I didn't do so well in this course. It's like I'm going to get a bad mark in the exam. I'm going to get a bad mark in the course. That's going to screw up my ability to finish my degree. I'm never going to get into the field of my choice. It's just another piece of indication that I'm useless and that life isn't worthwhile. Bang, I'm going to jump off a bridge. And if you're really depressed, it's like each of those things hits you with the certainty of truth. It's really not good. And so you want to be careful. You want to be careful about walking down that pathway when you make a mistake. You think, okay, what's the narrowest framework of interpretation within which I can understand this that will require minimal behavioral change to decrease the probability that it will happen again? It's mental hygiene, fundamentally.